Blog Talk Radio.
Sorry, Hempsters, just got a little technical difficulty there on the connection, but we're back. This is your Hempy host, Tyler Hemp. We're here to empower your hemposphere, and today we're going to cover a very important topic in the United States and globally, ultimately. I have a very special, intelligent, energizing, experienced, knowledgeable guest on today's show. His name is Patrick Moore, and if you haven't met him or heard of him, he's an amazing, eclectic, and enlightening man. And he's most certainly someone who's getting the job done as it relates to taking action in the world of cannabis and hemp. This guy is on a mission to empower the world, and that is exactly why we're so excited to have him on today's show. He's accomplished so many amazing things in his life, and he's still a young guy, but just to give you an idea of what he's actually worked on, he's worked shoulder to shoulder with Jack Herror, and he's been on the front lines of the cannabis movement, doing such amazing things for this community and raising awareness, educating people. Patrick, it's so awesome to have you on today's show. Thanks for being with us.
Oh, I am so honored, and what a very, very nice introduction. Thank you.
Yeah. So just to kind of give the listeners that maybe haven't heard of you before an intro of your background. We've had you on the show once before, but we'd love to just get a brief overview. What initially got you into the hemp movement, and what inspired you to be so committed to making a difference with cannabis and hemp?
Well, in the late 80s, I'd read the Psychedelic Encyclopedia, and it had a great chapter in there about cannabis, and that really was the first kind of opening of my mind that there was something bigger behind the, what we were all sort of hearing in high school about cannabis or marijuana. And then I came to California, and in 1990 I met Jack Herror and was introduced to the idea in a very vivid way that hemp could save the planet. And that was the beginning. I mean, I immediately picked up the California Cannabis Hemp Initiative that he was working with, and in 1990 was trying to pass the initiative that we're working on this year. So it's been a long run, and I couldn't be more honored or stoked to follow that path. There were several options I had at that moment, and I decided to follow and see what the hempster was talking about. And here I am 25 years later running my car on hemp oil. I eat hemp every day. I wear hemp from head to toe. And I am on the verge of introducing hemp in a very liberal, progressive way back to my state of California. So, yeah,
right on.
It's been full arch.
I love it. I really appreciate your tenacity, your energy. Not only are you really knowledgeable about hemp and cannabis, but you know a lot about other aspects and important areas of life, and just such an all-around amazing guy. I want to get deep into the California Cannabis Hemp Initiative, otherwise known as the Jack Herror Initiative. So tell us the overall crux of why this initiative is different than other initiatives, and what exactly is a ballot initiative? I know that's kind of a large question, but maybe we can break it down.
All right, we'll take it back to 1911 when California became I believe it was the 10th or 11th state to initiate the ballot initiative process, and they considered that to be a very important way to sidestep power and influence getting involved in politics in America. And there's always been that tendency that those who had the most money could get the Senate seats, could get their politicians into the governorship, and that way influence or manipulate politics against the larger population. And as a remedy to that, a ballot initiative was created where the people could sidestep Sacramento, we could sidestep the governor, and we could create our own laws. And that is, I believe, one of the things that's helped create this image of California as being very progressive and being kind of different, and the sort of unique look people have of California, or influence they have, or idea they have of it. I think a lot of that's rooted in the fact that every decade we've been able to sidestep traditional politics and make our own laws. And I know that's what set us apart in the world in the mid-'90s when it passed Proposition 215. There was a bill that never would have made it past the first person in Sacramento. I don't know if we ever could have gotten one, much less 10 or 20 sponsors for that. Same with the Jack Herror initiative today. We wouldn't bother, if we didn't have the option of a ballot initiative, I certainly wouldn't be running around Sacramento trying to find enough senators to sponsor this bill in the House. So it is an incredibly valuable tool. It simply involves the process of collecting signatures. If we get enough signatures, we can place the ballot on the initiative, or we can place the initiative on the ballot in November and have it voted on, as well as the other issues that are on the up for the vote. So it is, again, a very unique tool. Many states have it, but most do not. And as I talk to people around the country involved in this movement, in states where there isn't a ballot initiative, I admit I'm a little frustrated. I'm not sure exactly what to tell them because they can't take a very progressive piece of legislation into mainstream politics. And so, again, it's really, really doubly up to us to make the impression and to make the statement that fair and equal access to cannabis is crucial and necessary and attainable in states where it is, and at least put that message out and do it on behalf of those who don't even have the option to do it.
Right. So thank you for that. It's a good summary of what a ballot initiative is and how important it is, especially for Californians. So how does this initiative differ from other initiatives? And offhand, do you know about how many initiatives there are? And what if somebody signs another initiative? Can they also sign this one? Tell us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. No, I kind of hinted at it in my intro. And the key difference to our initiative and the other 12 that have been introduced in California right now is we are founded on fair and equal access to cannabis. Hemp is only going to save the planet if it's in our hands. If we allow hemp to be corporatized, if we allow hemp to be monopolized, the big corporations aren't going to creatively use hemp the way the average population would. So for us, the vision of success isn't just legalizing hemp, isn't just having cannabis available at 7-Elevens. It is retooling society from the ground up based on a sustainable resource. What California could do with a sustainable resource, especially with the Central Valley having the problems they've had in the last 20 years, we could turn around and create one of the largest industries in the world in biosustainable plastics, biosustainable wood pulp, and which can be built into any type of building material, a sustainable fuel, and that's maybe the second most important niche in this whole campaign. Sustainable fuel can be, again, I mentioned earlier, I was running my Mercedes-Benz diesel off of hemp oil. The seed from the oil from the seed is a perfectly viable diesel fuel today, and we could be producing it in the Central Valley the way Texas or Saudi Arabia pulls oil out of the ground. And with that, we can begin to change the world. And perhaps the most important single use of hemp is as a food source. So I always, that's always the beginner and opener for me, is the idea that the 20th century may historically be viewed as the century in which they tried to starve us, or the century at which we became malnourished because we lost the central food source we relied on for hundreds of thousands of years to sustain our species, hemp seed. And 100 years of not having that, our health situation worldwide is not anything to brag about. And I believe the vast majority of that's related to essential fatty acid deficiencies. 3, 6, and 9 are so crucial to the way our entire body works. And without that proper protein source, we're all dealing with layers of issues related to malnutrition. So those are the pieces. That's why. Those are the whys we need to fight for this. Those are why California needs to be back at the cutting edge of this movement, because we're seen as that, and in the medical aspects, we're still that way in many ways. The leaders of the world in cannabis research. We need to, as Germany and Canada and Thailand have, embrace the industrial side of it as much as we embrace the medicinal side of it. And that is a winning combination for the 21st century.
Amen. So let's talk about cannabis in terms of the people out there that, let's say, they're really for hemp. They love the clothing and the food and the building aspects. But let's say that they have a fear about the psychoactive component of cannabis hemp. What could you say to somebody who might have a fear around the psychoactive component, but they're for the industrial aspects of hemp. How does this initiative overcome some of that fear?
Certainly, no. Well, we frame it, and the Jack Herror initiative frames the personal use of cannabis in the same context to be analogous with the way beer and wine are handled in America today. So there's already psychoactive substances around us that are culturally accepted, and they're all, and then it just gets a matter of research, and then they're all much more dangerous than cannabis. So if we're going to live in literally a drug-free culture where there's, nothing's going to be used to change anybody's headspace, then that's a different argument. But if we're going to live in a culture where people are allowed to drink themselves into oblivion every weekend, and is a very common practice in America, or they're going to do a myriad of other legal drugs, then cannabis has to be weighed in on that scale. And when it is, when you look at it scientifically, when you look at it from an academic point of view, it is the least impactful, the least dangerous, the least, and the high is a much more mild high, at the point that they keep retesting cannabis against driving skills. And I found a couple of recent articles, and then there's a series of things 2020's done over the last 25 years, a couple of different segments, all making the point on, well, what is the point in which a driver is impaired while using cannabis? And it is so shocking because the rate of before anybody even begins to look like they're impaired driving behind the wheel, they've smoked 30 times what would be the first level of being buzzed. And when somebody's drinking, they get a buzz, and it's at double that or maybe triple that they start to get impaired driving. But at double, triple that, nothing. At 10 times that, smoking, nothing. At 20 times that, smoking. And 30 times, few of the people started having a little bit of a hard time driving. So it's the level at which that high is the least impactful upon our actual actions that really has to be evaluated. And again, there's a demonization. The first casualty of war is the truth, as they say. So this 80-year war and a very intense 40-year war on cannabis has involved more lies and propaganda than maybe any war in history. So I understand that there's going to be people with fear out there. There's going to be people who have misconceptions or have these demonizations deep in them. And after generations now we have grandmothers teaching generations that there's something demonic. They literally called it the devil's weed for a long time. So there is going to be some learning curve that we're all facing coming back into a cannabis-friendly culture. And it's up to us to be educated enough and well-spoken enough and to share the good news about what we're finding out about cannabis all the time to reset culture. As much emphasis as we put on the propagandizing against us, it's going to be up to us to propagandize for us and put it in the context for those who just don't know.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. You're absolutely right. And focusing on parents, focusing on children in the way of education, doing workshops, and there's wonderful events going on constantly all over California and ultimately all over the world where people are now doing workshops on hemp building and next year, April 2016, in San Diego, there's going to be a cannabis village at the Earth Day event. So it's going to be the largest Earth Day event on the planet, expected 80,000 people, and they're going to have an entire cannabis village dedicated to education. So it is happening, or hempening as we like to say. And so where can people go? Obviously, they can go to cchi2016.org, download this Cannabis and Hemp Initiative, read it for yourself, show it to your friends. Now, how can people start giving their signature? When is that going to happen, and how long do we have, and how many signatures do you require, or are required for the ballot initiative?
Fantastic. Now, we need about 380,000 signatures this year, which by our general standards, we then try to collect around 600,000 because not all signatures we get are valid, and so there's a margin there which we need to compensate for. So we're going to try to collect about 600,000 signatures this year. We start in about a week. We're actually going to be hitting the streets October 31st with teams all over the state. It's very simple to get involved. If you go to the same website, cchi2016.org, click the volunteer button and fill in your information, including your zip code, and we'll be able to arrange you or connect you with a regional coordinator. We have regional coordinators all over the state who are going to be getting the packages of petitions, and they're going to be doing trainings with their local coordinators and their feet on the street petitioners, and then sending people out to different events. And if you're in a larger metropolis, any big section, any big intersection, the malls, the corners of busy streets, there are events happening everywhere all the time if you're in a bigger city, or waiting for those weekend events when people get together at farmers markets or at whatever the seasonal events are in your area, and just introducing the idea of progressive and fair legalization. A lot of the cannabis movement in California has been telling Jack Herror and now all of us for decades that the California Cannabis Hemp Initiative is just too progressive for California. Very few people in the cannabis industry have been able to say, we don't like what you're talking about. We don't want to limit taxes. We don't want to limit licensing fees. We don't want to free the pot prisoners. So they say it's not reasonable in California to expect that. We have to be reasonable. We have to be level-headed, and the housewives in Orange County and Fresno aren't going to let you free the pot prisoners. They're not going to go along with 99 plants. They're not going to go along with limiting taxes. Well, in 2013, Field Poll, and that's the second largest polling company in the world, and maybe the most respected polling company in the world, did a major poll here in California. And it is cited across the board, Wall Street Journal and the New York Times and all the other groups, the CCPR and the Reform California, all these people cite this initiative, or cite this field poll quite often, and it starts with, they found out 55% of the people in California want to legalize cannabis, and that's a great sign. That's a solid ground to stand on in politics if you're starting out at 55%. The second part of the poll, nobody ever cites, nobody ever reads, and I can understand why people running other ballot initiatives skip that second part. I've always had a hard time getting my head around why that and how professional journalists have been able to skip the second half of a two-part poll. The second half says, would you then want to legalize using this initiative? And it was the 2014 California Cannabis Hemp Initiative. And the number went from 55% to 56%. So that so flies in the face that California isn't ready for progressive legalization. We're the only poll I know of. This is the only initiative I know of that takes 1% of the people out there who don't want to see cannabis legalized, but when they hear about the radical legalization, that's, all the things that we are, they say yes. So I had the ultimate confirmation in 2013, because that was always one of those mysteries that we couldn't ever quite prove. We never had the money to put into a poll. Actually, one of the big newspapers in Santa Rosa paid for that one. And there it was, scientific fact that we're not too progressive for California. California might be too progressive for ASA and NORML and MPP and the DPA, who's been telling us for years, this just won't float. So where they're having a hard time getting their wording and their concepts accepted by the California votary, we are not. We're finding out that, California is progressive, just like we always kind of knew and thought it was, and the Jack Herror Initiative is a good fit for this state, that people in the state do understand enough about cannabis and cannabis culture not to be terrified of freeing the pot prisoners, not to be intimidated by the fact that everyone's going to have access to this market and it's not going to be controlled by big corporations to protect us from this once dangerous narcotic. That's the framework they use often, that somehow we need to be protected from this because it was once a dangerous drug. And that's just not going to work here in California. They maybe they'll pull that off in, Colorado or Washington or Alaska or Idaho. But in California, we know enough about cannabis and how important it is to our economy not to just give it away, not to hand it over to corporations and say, yeah, you take care of that for us, package us up and, get us some Marlboro Greens at the 7-Eleven, and we'll be cool with that. We're Californians. We're not cool with that.
Mm-hmm. So what about this concept of cross-pollination, and if cannabis is legalized in California for both recreational as well as industrial purposes or medicinal, what is, there is a concern out there that because there's, the Emerald Triangle and, up in Northern California on the coast there's a lot of cannabis growers, and really a lot of California has a lot of cannabis growers for medical purposes, and one of the biggest concerns is that the actual cannabis enthusiasts are the ones that are preventing an initiative like this from even going through because they're afraid of cross-pollination, meaning their plants are going to go to seed and the high THC content is going to be diminished, which is what they don't want. So can you kind of speak or shed light on the importance of educating people about this and how we can overcome that concern?
Certainly, no. There's great research being done all over the world today as these two major agricultural crops that are, just so related to each other are evolving in unison in places like Australia and places like Germany. And there's so clear guidelines are being set and are being found. And the general universal guideline that's being evolved right now seems to be a buffer zone of 3 miles and at a safer zone 10 miles. So that zone between 3 and 10 miles seems to be the general understanding of a safe zone between a large-scale industrial hemp community and the medicinal farms California is so famous for at this point. There would be zero impetus, zero incentive for anybody to go into the hills of Northern California and try to plant industrial hemp. It would be counterproductive on many levels. It's not that kind of crop. For places like the Central Valley and for places that are agriculturally based, it is the perfect crop. There's very little, again, last few times I've driven through the Central Valley, I was heartbroken at the miles, almost as far as I could see, of dead almond trees, of these plants that aren't drought resistant, of plants that aren't profitable to the level where they're worth farming anymore. And hemp, as always is, it's a drought resistant plant that offers so much out of it that at no point does it become not profitable to grow. It's the highest profit margin per acre of almost any crop in the world, and offers us so much that including the fixing of our soil, the 100 years of sort of agricultural abuse the Central Valley has taken. Much of that could be remediated and corrected in the next 10 years with a large scale industrial hemp industry growing out of the Central Valley. But the fear, because I've heard many times that a hemp policy can travel 1,000 miles or 5,000 miles, and on some technicality that is true. I mean, it is like it's almost like the butterfly wing on the, butterfly flapping its wings on the other side of the world being responsible for a tornado somewhere. There is a philosophical concept that, yes, they have found a pollen seed that's made it from, but most pollen goes less than a quarter mile. So this 3 to 10 mile buffer zone is the safest of zones. It is again well studied academically and says, hey, this would be this is a reasonable guideline. And I know that's something within the state of California we can find the balance of, because if we can introduce $5 to $20 trillion a year crop out of the Central Valley, growers in the state can go back to selling their pounds at $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 a pound, and nobody's going to blink twice at $100 and $100 an eighth. If we're producing $20 trillion out of the Central Valley, that's making hemp shuttles, hemp airplanes, hemp cars, hemp houses, hemp food. If we are like Saudi Arabia with a never-ending supply of the raw resource the world runs on, we'll become a very wealthy nation. It is my understanding that the reason the price of cannabis has dropped so heavily over the last 8 years is not because of legalization, but has more to do with the fact that our economy has crashed, that we've lost more jobs and more industries in California in the last 10 years than any point in history, and people are having a harder time surviving. What do they say? 40% of people coming out of college are going back and living with their parents right now. So many of the gauges of what's wrong with an economy we're shouting, we're immersed in, and yet we're sort of pretending like, the official media is not even calling it a recession anymore, and yet by some definitions we're in the middle of a Great Depression. And so a way out of that is introducing a crop that offers, because again, it's an $80 billion industry in Northern and Southern California in cannabis flowers, but a $5 to $20 trillion industry in cannabis, the other 50,000 uses for cannabis hemp.
Yeah.
So the two will fit together in a very snug way.
Beautifully said. We have about 4 minutes left, and I believe we have a caller on the line. Let me see if they have a question real quick.
Fantastic.
Hi, caller, calling from the 310 number. Did you have a question for Patrick?
Oh, well, this is Milan Moore, calling from CCHI, California Cannabis. I'm just happy to hear that Patrick talking about these important topics, and these are definitely concerns that, a lot of the community has when we're looking forward to, building this model for legalization. And I'm thrilled and excited to hear you guys talking about it. It's all good stuff. I know there's lots of questions, people have, but I think what's most important is that we have, through CCHI, legislation that protects and really preserves the unique and diverse communities in California. For us to say that, there should be some one blanket standard for all the communities, I think in some ways is, that's just doing us a disservice, and that's something that I can appreciate with what Patrick is saying, that, we're trying to create something that is able to fit all the different varying landscapes, communities. In California we have desert, we have lush valleys, we have mountain areas, and there's only one plant that can actually adapt to all those different different terrains and be utilized and to maximum potential. So thank you for
thank you for tuning in. Yeah, we just have about 2 minutes left, so I have one last question for Patrick. If there was one thing that you could offer our listeners today, obviously signing this initiative is essentially crucial, but what's one thing that our listeners can do today to raise more awareness about hemp and bring hemp to the people, bring hemp back to the people?
Well, right now I see the finest future in hemp is being California getting its hands on it in a progressive way. So the biggest opposition to that is the cannabis legalization movement putting forward initiatives that won't put it in our hands. So right now Californians need to get involved in the political process. We need to read all the initiatives that are on the and most of them are vanity initiatives. Probably 8 of the 12 that have been filed are just there to make a point. But the Reform California, perhaps a few others, they're worth really reading. And then once you understand that they're trying to take away our rights, they're trying to take away the rights we have right now in medical, and then give us a very limited version of legalization that has very little access to industrial hemp, or has very little access to being involved in the industry, and recognize what that means for our future and weigh that against what we're offering, and then pick a side and jump in and fight like crazy to protect your rights. We really need we need a community wellspring. We need a group that's educated on the facts of these initiatives, and we can change the world and then ultimately save the world from the path we're on right now.
Amen. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. This is your host, Tyler Hemp, with HempAware Radio. Check out the past archived Hempisodes on the iTunes podcast library. Download this episode. Share it with your friends on Facebook, on your website. There's a place where you can embed it onto your website. Go take action. Do something today and go make it hempen. Thanks so much for tuning in, and thanks for being with us, Patrick. Have a blessed day.
Awesome, Tyler. Thank you.
Blessings.
You rock.